Hi, everyone. I'm Rebecca Tolin. I am a mind body practitioner and teacher, and I am seeing more and more people recover from long COVID using a mind body approach. Today, I'm really excited to be speaking with Leon Williams. He was a healthy young man working full time with two young children when he got sick with long COVID and then fell very ill to the point where he had to quit his job and go on disability. He essentially felt that life as he knew it had ended and started doing lots of research. And fortunately, he discovered this mind body approach that John Sarno originally called TMS. And we now understand is a process happening in the brain and nervous system. He found one of my videos that I made with Sarah Rainwater, who recovered from long COVID, and really applied this approach. And I'm happy to say he made a full recovery and is here to share the details with us. So, Leon, thank you so much for reaching out.
Oh, pleasure. No, it's great to speak to you and to be able to be here and to share my experience.
What a journey you've been on. When you first reached out and you explained how debilitated you had become, and then that you had totally recovered and run a 5K and was back to working full time, I just thought, oh, this is so fantastic. So just paint a picture for us of what happened with COVID. What were your symptoms and how did they become prolonged?
Sure. So my symptoms were initially, with the initial infection, I didn't have a cough. I had a bit of a stuffy nose, slight headache, and just felt a bit achy. And then after about a week or two, that then they kind of changed around. So then it was quite severe brain fog, which lasted quite a long time. And then fatigue, which is very different to tiredness, let me just say. Sensitive to bright lights and, overstimulating environments. I guess, and then all sorts of things. I had headaches for a period of time. I had chest pains for a period of time. I had some rashes as well. So it was a pretty grim experience. Each one would finish and then another would kind of start. And so I would say the initial acute infection probably lasted for like 2 or 3 weeks. And then after that, what I was kind of left with was the brain fog and the fatigue and the weakness and just feeling completely debilitated, really.
Yeah. And like you say, fatigue is really different when it's at that level where you simply can't push past it. So you felt so poorly, you couldn't even work. You couldn't do much around the house, it sounds like.
No, yeah, that was kind of, that was really tough because, I've not experienced that or anything like that before. So, and there came a point where I was like, I tried to go to work and it just didn't happen. I remember getting on the train just about, and I literally was sat outside my workplace and I thought, okay, I'm either gonna collapse or I'm gonna faint or I'm gonna have a heart attack. One of these things is gonna happen. And then I peeled myself up off the floor and had to go back home. And then that was it. It was just, it was totally overwhelming experience, really. But
and it's so scary, isn't it? I mean, that can be terrifying, especially when you don't know what's going on. And it sounds like you weren't getting clear answers from your doctors or really anything that was helping.
Yeah, no, I think so, definitely. And initially I was like, okay, I've tested positive, and and then like week 2 and 3, I was like, this isn't shifting. I went to an out of hours doctor. They were like, yeah, you've got a secondary chest infection. And then I ended up at another point going to A&E because I had I kept feeling faint and I had these POTS-like symptoms, which is postural orthostatic Yeah. And then
Tachycardia syndrome. Yeah,
there
just
we
the
go.
name is
Yeah,
actually quite scary. And those are common symptoms with
yeah,
COVID,
yeah,
or even what I had was CFS. Yeah.
yeah. And all those symptoms, can be really, really scary. And so when I was going to the doctors and I'd been to A&E, and they were like, yeah, no, you're fine. And then after 6 weeks, I booked an appointment with my GP, and he was like, look, it sounds like you've got some kind of post-viral fatigue. And I was like, okay, what can I do? And he was like, well, we don't really know. So, it could take a while. So there was some hope. But he kind of said to me, there are support groups on the web, etc. So off I went, and that's what I did. I started to look up, because there was no pill that could make me better. And
Yeah, it's sort of like we're left with Dr.
yeah,
Google at that point.
man, Dr. Google can be,
Which
it
is
can
all
be,
over the map. It can be very scary. Yeah.
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 And so I tried a few different things until I came across your work and Dan Buglio's work, and Jim Prusak as well. And that particular video that you did with Sarah Rainwater for me was like, whoa, okay, this is really just something connected with me. I was like, yes. And then I subsequently watched your own recovery story, which you did with Jim. And again, I was just like, wow, it just rang true. And I was like, this is it. And it happened quite quickly once I applied the work.
And let's just ask you for people who are new to this approach, kind of what that light bulb moment was, like what your understanding was, because John Sarno originally called this knowledge therapy, because just understanding what's happening in our brain and body can create more of a sense of safety and create a shift in and of itself. So what was it that really resonated with you thought, this is what's happening with me and I'm going to be okay?
It's a good point. So I'd had a lot of bad information, and that bad information, I don't think is ever intended to be bad information. It's coming from a good place, because people are struggling and they don't have any answers. And so you find people who are suffering with the same symptoms as you. And then there are benefits of having a support group. But then what happens is, when there's no cure for certain things like CFS or long COVID, or whatever your set of symptoms may be, you then enter this kind of world where people have very strong opinions, and your illness, I suppose, becomes a part of your identity, because you've been stripped of so much of your life. And so when that happens, your beliefs about it and that world become very instilled, and people are very attached to them. But the light bulb moment for me was when I watched those videos with you and Sarah Rainwater, and then your stuff with Jim Prusak, and watching with Dan Buglio, another TMS coach. I realized that there was no structural, despite my, I'd had COVID, there was no structural damage to my body. My blood work was coming back fine. My organs were all intact. So my body was okay. And I was like, that's great. And actually, I'm not broken. And once you realize that you're not broken, that was it. I was just like, yes, I'm not, there's something else at play here. And doctors are amazing, because, they can fix, they can operate on a heart, they can do all sorts of things, they can treat bacterial infections, they can treat sepsis and all sorts of things. So when I became 100% sure there was nothing wrong with my body at all, that was when I started to make massive progress. And then I realized that this was all fine. It was just here. And when I say just here, I don't mean you have a mental health issue. I don't mean this is all in your head or it's psychological, because, these symptoms are 100% real, but they come from a place of where the brain perceives danger, or the brain perceives, and then creates pain or creates symptoms. And then we get stuck in a cycle. And it's very easy to get stuck in that cycle when you've been told, well, there's no cure. And with long COVID, we don't know. I mean, there are endless, possibilities. And, and when you get into that mindset, which is quite natural to do, you can definitely get stuck in a cycle. And that's absolutely what happened to me.
And I just love when somebody has that moment, like where you had that moment where you got it. Always know there's going to be rapid change. And of course, then there are ups and downs. But when we realize not only is our body not broken, our brain's not broken either, right? It's just in a certain state of hypervigilance. It hasn't come down for this sustained threat response, which can happen in a high stress situation. Then as things can calm down, that already alone creates a sense of safety, which then, as you're sending sort of that feedback to your brain that I'm okay, that I'm safe, it can start calming down because it's actually getting data from the external environment as well as our internal environment as well. But I know that knowledge alone wasn't enough for me. It wasn't quite enough for you. There's also practices in ways you shifted the way you thought about your body, the way you were acting, the way you were acknowledging and working with body sensations and emotions. So tell us what you did from there. Because, I mean, first, if somebody wants to dive into this approach, they're going to want to know,
Yeah, no, 100%. Yeah. So accurate knowledge and information was a massive part of it. And that, to me, initially, if you'd have said that to me when I was in the height of my symptoms, I'd have told you where to go because, quite literally. But as this went on, I tried so many different things. And I then, took the plunge with this. And so with the TMS stuff. And so what did I do? I did lots of breath work initially. That was kind of before I entered this kind of world. But I was doing that to calm my nervous system down. So I spent a lot of time doing that. And that was very soothing. And that did give me moments of peace. Also, I remember in your video, you talked about when you used to sit outside in nature, in the garden a lot. That's what I did as well during the summer months, trying to calm. But the main stuff with this kind of work was the somatic tracking, which is a game changer because you get to become an observer of your own body. So you're not the person in there going, oh God, I have this symptom. Oh God, I'm in this pain, or this is going to happen, or this is going to happen. But you can just slowly learn and sit back to watch yourself almost from the side of the river and just watch all these things flow through you. And without trying to change anything. And that's where it kind of, the work really started for me. And, learning that these sensations are feelings and maybe even emotions, and they're just passing through, and letting them be and letting them pass. And the great thing about it is like when you're doing that kind of work and you're in a hypervigilant state with lots of sensations and symptoms, when you're doing that work, you can feel them moving around. It's crazy. I was like, oh my goodness, now I've got this like tingling here, and then I've got these kind of shooting sensations, or now I've got this weakness or trembling sensation, and it's moving around. So that just proves, it's your autonomic nervous system, with your brain sending messages of signals of danger, because it's moving around. It's not, you've not got appendicitis, or you've not got, X, Y, or Z.
Exactly.
And so tracking was,
Oh, I also get so excited when somebody's really sees the value in somatic tracking, because that was also just a key part of my healing, because you describe it so well. First of all, you become the mindful observer. Yeah. So you are not a symptom, and you're not identifying with the diagnosis or being a sick person, but it also sort of gives you this witnessing quality, and you're interacting with the sensation. And whether it's a symptom or an emotion, it's a sensation in the body. And I noticed when I was in my state of recovery from chronic fatigue syndrome, I was practicing somatic tracking every day. And sometimes the sensations, i.e. symptoms, would morph into emotions. I'm curious if that happened with you, if you felt through somatic tracking, you got in touch with your emotional world more, or was it more a matter of just turning down the danger level of the symptom?
Yeah, it's a good point. So I did. So with the somatic tracking as well, I then started journaling. And again, if you'd have told me this during the height of my symptoms 3 months prior to that, I'd have been like, what? How is journaling going to help me get out of this? I was just like, I'd have literally been like, no way. But I swear, I started journaling, and I started doing it every day. Did it for about probably 3 or 4 weeks every day for like 15, 20 minutes. And it's not journaling where you sit down and, it's just like expressive writing, really. And sometimes I would just be writing stuff that made no sense whatsoever, but it's just an outlet. And then there were certain things that I was, I would go back to, certain stressful events in my life, things that I hadn't, feel I had sort of tied up the ends with, or regrets. And so, I did a lot of stuff about that. And then I tell you what did happen. When I did that, my symptoms reduced, my physical symptoms reduced quite drastically. And then I was left with this quite overwhelming anxiety and just quite low level mood, sort of depression. But again, that's, so it was strange. It was kind of, that was a weird period. And then that passed. And then, so I did do emotional work to a degree.
Well,
yeah.
And I'm so glad you stuck with that, because a lot of times when people do either the somatic tracking or the expressive writing, it can stir up stuff, right? Because you're actually going into the emotional content that basically your brain has been protecting you from. And so it can stir up a lot. And sometimes symptoms get worse. They certainly change and they shapeshift. And I see that can be common, that the fatigue, as the freeze state starts thawing, it can sort of turn into this sympathetic activation or anxiety. And so it's great that you kept working with these. These are two of the main tools in this approach, is the expressive rating and the somatic tracking. And then you saw things kind of evened out. And about what kind of a time span are we talking about that you had these sort of debilitating post-COVID symptoms? And then how long did it take to work with these practices to recover?
So I'd say May and June of this year were, May, June, July were, those 3 months were when it was at its kind of peak.
For 2022, okay.
2022. And then when we got to August, I got a little bit better because I've been doing some sort of breath work and meditation. And I was still, unable to work and stuff. And then I remember it quite clearly. I remember it like at the start of September, I started doing the somatic tracking every day and started then doing the expressive writing. I thought, I'm just going to write for September, just going to see how it goes. And then when I kind of got to the end of September, I was like, oh, I'm suddenly doing a hell of a lot more. Like I was, I made quite a significant improvement. And there were still times in that period where I was like, I would be like, but is this mind body? Is this TMS? Maybe this is different. And, I think the true belief only comes after a little bit of time. And then once I got into October, I was just then, something shifted. And I was just doing so much more. I started to go for long walks, considering I was only going to my shop, which is like 5 minutes away before, on good days, 5-minute walk. And I would start, and then my walks, because I used to run a lot before, my walks turned into, I was like, one day in October, I was like, you know what? If I can walk, this is the only feelings that I can feel now, these sensations that I'm feeling through my body. are just feelings. They're nothing to be afraid of. There's nothing wrong with my body. It's just a form of anxiety, or a form of, my brain still being stuck in that loop. And I just remember starting to do some running whilst I was out on my walk.
Wow, fantastic.
Like for like 2 or 3 minutes, then I'd stop and I was like, I'm fine, there's nothing wrong. And then I remember kind of having some music on. I was like, had my music on, I was listening to Pearl Jam, and I was like, okay, I'm going to start it again in a minute. And so I ran again for another 2 minutes, and I kind of got home and I was like, this is great, man. And then it kind of built up over time. And then within like 2 weeks later, I was sort of, I ran for like 2 miles, and then, and then in November, I managed to do a 5K. And then I was suddenly back going to sports football games. I was back going out for dinner. I was back going to the pub with my friends. I was back picking up my kids and running the house and doing all those things. And so, yeah.
Incredible. It's incredible. I mean, because I'm really hearing that you believed you're okay so fully, you were able to keep reinforcing that message. And so your brain and your body felt safe. And then you kind of did what we would call graded exposure. You slowly increased activities, right, with those safety messages.
Yeah.
And also, I'm hearing, actually, there's a psychologist, Alan Gordon, calls this positive mood induction, but basically just bringing up your mood. So you're listening to Pearl Jam, you're listening to music you like, you're enjoying the run. And when we're in this positive frame of mind and we're feeling at peace or joy, it definitely is signaling to the brain and nervous system that we are not running from a tiger, right? There is no threat. And I think a lot of times people underestimate the power of enjoyment, of doing what we really enjoy, and just learning to stand up to that fear and continually move forward. And then you were able to go back to work then.
And I mean, don't get me wrong, during some of those things, like I remember being out, and it was hard sometimes. I had to have real words with myself and be like, Leon, this is okay. These are just sensations. They're just feelings. They can't hurt you. You're not going to crash. Nothing bad is going to happen. And that was hard sometimes, because I really had to, be strong and discipline myself. And it's when I say that, it's not about pushing through either, but it's about, those continual messages of safety to your brain, and truly believing and having the faith that, your body is okay, because the bloods are okay, your tissue is okay, your organs are fine. If there was anything structurally wrong with your body, the doctors would know. And they would get
exactly. They're good at that, finding anything really that's actually pathologically wrong.
Yeah. So once I really knew that, I was just like, yeah, it's okay. It's just my brain. It's just my brain. So yeah.
That is so brilliant. I love it. And then there had to be times though that you did get flare-ups of symptoms. Right. And so what did you do in that case? You just kept reinforcing that message. How did you sort of not let that scare you or drag you back down when you got symptoms?
Yeah, no, I know. Well, I guess what it turned into was like, I was starting to do the kind of really processing my emotions kind of stuff, which obviously Sarno talks about. And so I'd still journal from time to time, but really experience and allow the emotions to come and sit with them, and not just push them away. It's easy to just go, I'm not going to think about that. But so now when I do experience an emotion, or times of high stress or just life stuff, I do that thing of just sitting with it and going, I'm really pissed off, or that person really hurt me just then, and that's okay. And doing all that kind of work of self-soothing, talking to your inner child, all that kind of stuff, which actually has been really beneficial to me as well. And you have to be really careful about the way you talk to yourself, because I read a quote that, there's no one else in your whole lifetime that you're going to talk to than, this person in here. And so, what you tell yourself and the beliefs you have about yourself, I'm never going to get better, I'm a failure, I'm this, I'm that. And this work has opened up so much to me in terms of my own self-confidence. And, when I do have like I say, kind of the residual leftover of my COVID experience is basically kind of anxiety, I suppose, which I do get, but that's okay. It's just part of life, and I know how to deal with it, and I have the tools in place. I know there's nothing wrong with my body, and I know how to use my, whether it is the journaling or the somatic tracking or the talking and the self-soothing and the calm reassurance and those constant messages of safety, that you're safe, I'm okay. Yeah, so
Yeah,
that's,
I'm so glad you brought up sort of the self-criticism versus the
yeah,
self-soothing or self-compassion. That's so common that I see that, and John Sarno described people have these certain personality traits that tend to get body symptoms. This is not to say it's our fault. It absolutely is not our fault. But, we tend to be hard driving, conscientious, sort of do type people that can be a lot harder on ourselves often than other people. And I've really found with myself, and when I teach, shifting from self-criticism to self-compassion can be a game changer. It's amazing how many people feel safer and they're able to start reconnecting with themselves in a different way, where they're not just pushing themselves or beating themselves up for being sick. I mean, it's, feelings.
yeah,
We know we're not actually sick, but you feel that way.
yeah.
So it's really interesting to me. You sort of were able to discover that on your own, that you were able to just start self-soothing. And were there particular practices that were helpful for you, or was it more just like a shift in your attitude?
I think I just discovered a lot about myself. I think you do discover a lot about yourself when you go through something like this, and I just began to notice the patterns that I would get myself in and the way that I speak to myself a lot of the time. And I was just like, I'm really hard on myself, and I don't give myself enough credit, and I don't really put myself first. What I mean by that is, like, how best to explain? So, like, the way I speak to my children, if they're struggling or in pain or if they're sad, I would never shout at them or, be really harsh or critical. I would sit there and put them on my lap and, cuddle them and, soothe them and say, look, this is tough, but you're going to be okay. And you have to find that love for yourself. And I see myself so much in my son. So I was just like, I've got to start doing that to me. I've got to start really giving myself some love. I know it sounds really, but it's so true. And I think some people have a kind of an inbuilt confidence all the time, and some people don't. I don't know. But yeah, for me, I think that was a really key part to really be kind to myself and not give a shit what people think. And, and yeah, and just
Absolutely. Well, and it's like we're always talking to ourselves anyway. Everybody talks to themselves. Shifting that dialogue. And I often suggest that to people. Is there a child in your life that you love, or can you think of yourself as a child and start treating yourself that way? Because you once were a child, and we all still have that sort of scared, vulnerable part inside of us. So I love that you were able to sort of apply that from your young children to yourself.
Yeah.
That's beautiful. And then you model that for them too, what it's like to really be kind to yourself.
Absolutely.
So important. And, on that note, so it sounds like when you're looking back at kind of the perfect storm that set up this long COVID experience, because we know some people have the acute virus and then they recover and they're fine. And then other people have the acute virus and then they get this long COVID. And even some people that don't have the acute virus have these extended mind-body symptoms. What do you think kind of set you up? What were some of the life and emotional stressors that set up these circumstances now that you understand it?
Yeah. Initially at the time, I remember being like, well, I'm fine. I don't understand why this is happening. And actually, I had a lot going on, as we all have over the last 2 years to some degree. People have lost loved ones, and, or you heard in the news for 2 years, or when you opened a paper or switched on the radio, or when you spoke to your friends, it was like COVID, death, illness, mystery illness, disease, it was traumatic. But I suppose on a personal level, I'd kind of hit a milestone age in my life. I had to stop my job because my industry closed down, because the world shut down. So then I had to go and into a completely different field for a period of time and start a brand new job. I also moved from kind of bang in the city of London to kind of the suburbs. And so all that within, a confined space of time was kind of the perfect melting pot. And when I look back on it now, I kind of go, yeah, for me, this has been a stress illness. And yes, I had an initial COVID infection, but it's definitely been a stress illness. And stress illness is out there everywhere. You look at people that have heart attacks, you look at people that, are suffering from all kinds of things. Stress is a major contributor in our society, our environment, etc.
Absolutely. And to real physical illness. Exactly. I'm so glad you brought that up, because stress can cause heart attacks or heart disease, just as it can cause these post-viral symptoms. Yeah. Because of the way the brain and nervous system are still in this sympathetic activation, or even go into this freeze state. But I can understand, with everything that you went through, Leon, those are major life changes, and our brain likes stability, right? It likes to know what's going to be happening. And there was so much unknown. And so now, that you're on the other side of this, is there anything that you would recommend to people who are still stuck in this? I mean, there is a lot of people who don't have tissue damage, but are still reading these horror stories. They're just so scared. They're debilitated. Where should they begin?
Yeah. So, I mean, I wish when I'd gone to the doctor that, and it's not their fault at all, they're not trained in this kind of stuff, but I think it's becoming a bit of a pandemic in itself, because there are millions of people out there that have symptoms of some kind, whether it be like IBS or fibromyalgia, or, this is just my opinion. But I wish I'd been able to go to my doctor and for them to recognize that mind-body TMS is a thing. It's real. The mind connection, I don't think it's even kind of up for debate, that we can absolutely train our brains to create new neural pathways. And had that been in the kind of public mainstream, I can guarantee I'd have had a much smoother ride. For me as well, also, I think I had to get out of the support groups for a while, because what you tell your brain, if you're constantly feeding your brain horror stories, and you're consistently reaffirming that you're sick, and reaffirming that there's no way out, reaffirming that you can't do this, putting limitations on yourself, then I think you're never going to get out of the cycle. And so that was what I did. I kind of removed myself from all that stuff and just started to find your tribe, find your group of people, find what works for you. And that's what I did. That's why I reached out to you. I found this whole approach through your work and Dan and Jim, and it truly resonated to me. And I think that's kind of that in a nutshell. That's kind of it.
Because it starts with the knowledge. And once you really understand what's going on, and you're right, it's not mainstream. I mean, I've been fortunate enough to consult on a clinical trial with a physician from Harvard Medical Center on long COVID using this approach. And actually the results are really impressive. They're not published yet, but I'll share them when they are. So there's starting to be some research, but a lot of it is just sort of finding it on your own. And I like to really tell people, find find what gives you hope and makes you
Yeah.
feel safe. Anything that makes you feel scared or unsafe, that is not your path to healing.
No, exactly. And also, what I will say as well is I tried all kinds of things to, there was a diet thing that I was going to try, and there was, supplements, and, don't eat this, don't eat that, you can't do that, that's going to flare. And I was just like, you know what, all of that stuff. Yeah, of course, having a healthy diet, living a healthy lifestyle is important, etc. But in my opinion, none of that's going to work because it's here.
Yeah.
It's not there. There's nothing wrong here.
Exactly.
No deficiency. Even if you've got a, deficiency of vitamin B and you think, there you go. Yeah, but that's not going to explain these debilitating symptoms. There are other people walking around with, severe illness, which they don't know about yet. Sorry, hope I'm not triggering, but that's just a really important thing, I think.
Absolutely, because we can go down all these rabbit holes, chasing all the diets and supplements. And when we learn it's about feeling safe in our brain and nervous system. And if you feel safer and better eating a certain diet or taking supplements, so be it. That's great.
Yeah.
But you really want to get to the root cause of it, right? Which is the knowledge, which is the practices where you're working with different thoughts and emotions, and that witness quality. So, Leon, thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm so happy for you, and I'm so grateful to you for sharing this with others.
Oh, no, thank you. I just kind of felt it was my duty to, I'm not saying everyone will be having the same experience as me. And if someone or people out there can just take something from this, then that's fantastic, because there is a way out. And, whatever your symptoms are, whether it's long COVID or whether it's another mind-body thing, there's so many people that have benefited from this kind of work. I'm just so glad I reached out to you, because I had to say thank you, because I hadn't met you, but I felt like you were such a big part of, I kind of put my faith into you. So I had to reach out and say thanks. And it's been great to kind of meet you and get to know you a bit.
Oh, that is so heartwarming. Thank you so much, Leon. That just absolutely makes my day, makes my month. That's why I do what I do. And as you can hear, Leon and I want you to have the message that, there is a way out. There is a new paradigm of understanding for what causes these chronic symptoms, whether they're long COVID, CFS, chronic pain. In the absence of tissue damage, we now understand we can do a lot with our brain and nervous system, and working also directly with our body. If you want more information on this approach, you can go to my website at RebeccaTolin.com. You can also sign up for a free somatic tracking meditation that Leon was mentioning he did and was a big part of my recovery when you subscribe to my newsletter. Mostly, we want to leave you with the message: keep trying, keep learning and growing, follow whatever brings you hope. There is a way out, and take good care, everyone.